Adolf Hitler finds himself in his underground bunker in Berlin, consumed by fear and shaking uncontrollably. Outside, the sounds of his soldiers being mercilessly gunned down by the Soviet forces echo through the reinforced door. Trapped and unable to end his own life, Hitler realizes that his cyanide capsules and firearm were mistakenly left in the main room of the bunker when he sought refuge in the safe room. Amidst the eerie silence that follows the fierce battle, Hitler presses his ear against the cool metal door, straining to listen. Faint voices speaking Russian reach his ears, accompanied by a ticking sound. It seems as though a clock is counting down to an unknown event on the other side. Wide-eyed, Hitler swiftly moves to the far side of the room, seeking cover. Moments later, an explosion shakes the bunker, causing the door to collapse with a thud. As the dust and smoke settle, a group of heavily armed Soviet soldiers storms into the chamber. They discover Adolf Hitler cowering on the floor, curled up in a fetal position. They have successfully captured the monstrous dictator responsible for immense suffering and death across the globe. Now, the question arises, what should be done with him? While it is impossible to know with certainty the exact outcome had Hitler been captured during World War II, we can make educated guesses based on historical records and statements from leaders at the time. In one possible scenario, if Hitler was captured by Allied forces towards the end of the war, he would find himself in the hands of the Soviets. After enduring months of brutal fighting to expel the Nazi forces from their homeland, the Soviets have taken the battle to Germany. The devastation left in their wake is profound, with entire towns burned, naval facilities plundered, and airfields seized. However, it is the reputation of the Red Army's treatment of German citizens and Nazi sympathizers that strikes fear throughout the region. The Soviets show no mercy and resort to torture, fueled by their desire for revenge. Within the bunker, Hitler grapples with the grim reality that his forces are facing defeat on all fronts. Hope of turning the tide of the war is dwindling rapidly, yet Hitler stubbornly orders his men to continue fighting, preferring the sacrifice of every Aryan in Germany over surrendering to the Allied forces. As the Soviets breach their defenses, Hitler contemplates Plan B, taking his own life. But due to a series of unfortunate circumstances, he now finds himself in the custody of the Red Army soldiers, who drag him out of the bunker to face a crowd of thousands, cheering in triumph. Their shouts of curses and spitting serve as a testament to their hatred for the man who ignited World War II and caused the deaths of millions. Hitler pleads for mercy as he kneels in a city square, surrounded by Soviet soldiers who have endured unimaginable atrocities at the hands of the Nazis. Their burning passion for revenge is palpable. One soldier steps forward from the crowd, approaching Hitler in silence. Locking eyes with the dictator, he utters a few broken words in German, revealing his motivation, avenging his fallen comrades. In one swift motion, he draws his pistol, cocks the hammer, and shoots Hitler in the head, ending his life instantly. The crowd erupts in approval, although they will face reprimand from Stalin, their actions driven by a belief that the demon that was Adolf Hitler could not be allowed to live. Another possible scenario involves Hitler being brought to Moscow, following Joseph Stalin's orders to have him stand trial for his crimes. In this case, Hitler would be hidden aboard a secret transport bound for the Soviet Union, guarded heavily to prevent any rescue attempts by Nazi forces. Once in Moscow, he would be presented before Stalin, who views him with contempt. Hitler would then be confined in a high-security prison cell, awaiting his trial for war crimes. The news of Hitler's capture and imprisonment would be disseminated worldwide, with footage of his capture and incarceration reaching every corner of the globe. Images taken by Soviet photographers would grace the pages of newspapers, and video footage would be broadcasted globally, showcasing the audacious apprehension of the Nazi dictator. Weeks later, Hitler would be paraded through the streets of Moscow, as the Soviet populace hurls insults and rotten food at him. He would be led to the Kremlin to face trial. With the war reaching its conclusion and Nazi Germany crumbling without its leader, other Nazi officials surrender in recognition of their defeat. While scattered groups of Nazi youth and soldiers continue to fight in remote areas, the combined efforts of the Allied forces in Europe and the Soviets in the East have sealed the fate of the war. During this time, Allied leaders convene to determine the course of action for Adolf Hitler. It is unanimously decided that he must stand trial, knowing that his fate is already sealed. The trial would span several months, with witness after witness testifying against Hitler for his role in the mass genocide of the Jewish people and numerous other crimes against humanity. Ultimately, Hitler would be found guilty and led to Red Square, where millions would witness his ascent up the gallows. The noose would be placed around his neck, and as Joseph Stalin utters a few words, the trap door would be released. Hitler's life would swiftly end as his body swings back and forth, met with cheers from the Russian crowd that reverberate for miles. Before delving into an even more chilling scenario, it is important to explore one additional alternate outcome that might have unfolded had Hitler been captured at the end of World War II. In this alternate scenario, prepare yourself for a dark and unsettling narrative. Adolf Hitler, the notorious dictator responsible for unimaginable atrocities, finds himself captured by the Soviets and placed on trial in Moscow. This turn of events inadvertently grants him a platform to defend his heinous actions and spread his venomous hatred towards the Jewish people. While some dismiss his words as devoid of credibility, a small faction of Russian nationalists is captivated by his rhetoric. Astonishingly, despite Hitler's responsibility for the deaths of countless countrymen, these extremists seek a new figure to blame for their nation's struggles and rally behind his cause. They align themselves with the Russian Liberation Army and establish an expanded Nazi movement within the Soviet Union. Even though Allied leaders feared granting Hitler a platform to justify himself, they never anticipated the consequences would be this dire. As uprisings and chaos grip the Soviet Union, Hitler is unexpectedly liberated from prison by radical extremists. He is smuggled out of the country and joins other Nazi war criminals who have evaded capture by the Allies, finding refuge in South America. A secret Nazi nation begins to take shape on the continent, with Hitler's time in captivity only fueling his madness and bloodlust. Penning a sequel to Mein Kampf detailing his experiences in the Soviet prison, he formulates a new agenda: a global racial war. Hitler now envisions the conquest and annihilation of all democratic and communist nations, sparing only his Nazi brethren. He calls upon old and new allies to join him in South America. With Hitler free, a savage campaign unfolds as World War III erupts, with North America as its primary target. Although an extreme scenario, it reflects the genuine fears harbored by Allied leaders about allowing Hitler the opportunity to defend himself in trial. In an alternate course of events, envision a small group of elite Allied soldiers concealed amidst the dense German forest. They lie in wait, aware that Adolf Hitler, accompanied by a small retinue of guards, will pass through this secluded road. Having been airdropped the previous night, the team prepares to ambush the Führer's jeep. As the vehicle crests the hill, the Allied commander gives the signal, and the soldiers spring into action. They disable the jeep by shooting out its tires, causing it to veer off course and collide with a tree. Emerging from their hidden positions, the Allied soldiers unleash a hail of bullets upon the Nazi occupants, shattering the windshield and inflicting fatal wounds upon the front seat passengers. The Nazi general seated next to Hitler retaliates with gunfire, forcing the Allies to seek cover. However, a skilled sniper stationed in a treetop takes aim through his scope, holds his breath, and squeezes the trigger. The bullet pierces the general's skull, causing his head to explode. Meanwhile, Hitler frantically reaches for his pistol, but a Thompson machine gun is promptly pressed against his temple. The Allied force commander issues a chilling ultimatum, and Hitler reluctantly relinquishes his weapon. Subsequently, the Führer is seized, gagged, and the Special Forces unit embarks on a perilous journey through enemy territory, aware that time is of the essence before the Nazis discover their leader's abduction. The group manages to reach a Nazi Air Force base, where they devise a daring plan to escape with a stolen plane, Hitler in tow. Amidst a shift change, they seize the opportunity and sprint towards one of the Heinkel He-111 aircraft parked furthest away from the watchtower. Swiftly boarding the plane, they stow Hitler in the cargo hold, rendering him unconscious with a forceful blow from the butt of a gun. Two men hasten to the cockpit, starting the engines and directing the aircraft towards the runway. Amidst the ensuing chaos, the Nazis scramble to identify the unauthorized flight's perpetrators, oblivious to the fact that Allied soldiers are piloting the aircraft with Hitler as their captive. As the plane soars into the sky, the Nazis finally realize the gravity of the situation. Desperate, they open fire on the stolen Heinkel He-111, but the Allies swiftly outrange their shots. Crossing the North Sea, the plane eventually lands safely in Great Britain. Here, Adolf Hitler is incarcerated, and the British authorities announce the capture of the man responsible for igniting World War II. However, this turn of events does not guarantee a favorable outcome. Nazi Germany continues its dominance over Europe's war theater, and with Hitler detained, new leaders must emerge to spearhead the Nazi war effort. Among the potential contenders are three men who may prove more competent than Hitler himself. In this altered timeline, Hitler's capture during the height of World War II inadvertently ushers in Germany's best-case scenario. Heinrich Himmler assumes leadership over Nazi Germany, consolidating his command over the SS, Gestapo, and the entire Nazi military. Himmler swiftly rectifies Hitler's missteps and re-evaluates the plan to invade the Soviet Union, instead focusing on strengthening the Eastern Front and utilizing the SS as an auxiliary military force. While Himmler remains committed to the extermination of the Jewish people, he recognizes the need to allocate forces strategically. By fortifying the Eastern Front and guarding the English Channel, Himmler effectively repels the Allies' northern advances. He dispatches a significant contingent to support Italy in its North African campaign, achieving victories that eluded Hitler. These successes secure vital resources, including oil, which bolster Germany's war machine with minimal casualties compared to a failed invasion of the Soviet Union. Curiously, Hitler's capture during World War II proves to be a disastrous turn of events for the Allies. In Himmler's rise to power, Germany gains a leader who implements astute military strategies. Furthermore, Joseph Goebbels, the Minister for Public Enlightenment and Propaganda, seizes the opportunity to expand the Nazi cause beyond Germany's borders. Goebbels employs radio broadcasts and extensive propaganda campaigns, recruiting sympathizers across Europe, even within Allied nations. His fear-inducing tactics unite people against a common enemy, primarily the Jews, sustaining morale and bolstering the Nazi ranks. As Goebbels assumes control of the military aspects of the war, other capable generals make informed decisions, further strengthening Germany's position. With the Führer incarcerated, Germany potentially achieves territorial and numerical gains under Goebbels' manipulation and the leadership of competent military officials. Hermann Göring, once a trusted ally and friend of Hitler during his rise to power, harbored ambitions of his own after falling out of favor with the Führer. Göring aspired to control the entire Nazi party and military. Obsessed with the final solution, he now sees an opportunity to realize his grandiose visions. Formerly the commander-in-chief of the Luftwaffe, Göring assumes command over all branches of the military, intending to carry out Hitler's genocidal plans. In this alternate reality, capturing Hitler during World War II proves to be a double-edged sword. While it temporarily removes the infamous dictator from the equation, it inadvertently ushers in a new era of cunning and formidable Nazi leadership. The consequences reverberate across Europe, reshaping the course of the war and casting a shadow of uncertainty over its outcome. In this alternate scenario, Germany falls under the leadership of a new figure who is determined to continue the genocidal atrocities against the Jewish population across Europe. The Jews face a grim fate as the new leader of the Nazi Party displays the same relentless commitment to genocide as Adolf Hitler himself. However, this new leader, Göring, becomes easily distracted, prioritizing personal wealth and prestige over winning the war. His military decisions prove to be disastrous, and he dismisses the counsel of his advisors. The Nazi Party members grow increasingly frustrated with Göring's leadership and the way he runs the country. Eventually, they plot against him, assassinating him and creating a power vacuum in Germany. Unfortunately, none of the potential successors bring any good news for the rest of the world if Hitler were to be captured. Each successor possesses their own idiosyncrasies and may have even allowed Germany to achieve victory in the war. Regardless of who assumes power after Hitler, the former Führer's fate would have remained the same. Adolf Hitler finds himself confined to a cell, contemplating the path that led him to this point. As he stares at the stone walls, his musings are interrupted by the pungent aroma of a burning cigar. Hitler's attention shifts as he turns to face Winston Churchill, who stands on the other side of the bars, wearing a look of disgust and determination in his eyes. Churchill, harboring an intense hatred for Hitler and witnessing firsthand the devastation inflicted upon Europe by Germany, contemplates whether or not to use the loaded pistol in his possession. While the Allied leaders have agreed that Hitler should stand trial for his crimes, Churchill secretly desires to be the one to deliver the fatal blow. The two men lock eyes, and Churchill forcefully clears his throat before spitting on the floor in front of Hitler, conveying his contempt. Your trial will not be pleasant or merciful. Your fate is already sealed. I'll see you in hell, Churchill declares, before exiting the jail cell and leaving Hitler alone with his thoughts. Later that day, Adolf Hitler is escorted to the National Courthouse, where his trial unfolds swiftly. He is swiftly convicted of war crimes and crimes against humanity, ultimately receiving the death penalty. Britain opts not to sensationalize the execution. Instead, Hitler's body is placed on a Royal Navy vessel and dispatched into the frigid waters of the northern Atlantic. As sailors release the weighted body, it disappears into the abyss. Winston Churchill, standing on the deck with smoke billowing from his cigar, observes Hitler's body sinking, symbolizing the end of a tyrant. In Scenario 3, the hypothetical situation emerges where Adolf Hitler is captured by Allied forces at the outset of World War II. Witnessing the rise of the Nazi Party and Hitler's ambitions to dominate the world through mass genocide, Britain and France respond with incredulity as German forces launch an aggressive campaign in Poland. Recognizing the urgent need to halt the new German Führer's belligerence, Britain and France immediately dispatch their forces to push back the Nazis. This takes place in early 1939, when the German military, while growing, remains insufficiently equipped to confront the combined might of France, Great Britain, and the Nordic countries. The Allied forces successfully repel the Germans, cautioning Italy against involvement by threatening potential military intervention on Italian soil. Although the United States initially adopts an isolationist stance, perceiving Adolf Hitler and Nazi Germany as an existential threat to global stability, they ultimately decide to aid the European allies in their mission to thwart the deranged dictator. Through swift and decisive action, the Allies prevent Hitler from consolidating his power across Germany. Many of Germany's military assets, including tanks, aircraft, and naval vessels, are still in the process of being constructed. The Allied forces secure Germany's borders to prevent Nazi expansion and gradually converge on Berlin from all directions. Once they reach the city, they apprehend Adolf Hitler, placing him under arrest. A puppet government assumes control to oversee Germany's reconstruction, while Nazi sympathizers are swiftly apprehended and subjected to trial for their unprovoked aggression against Poland. As Allied intelligence delves deeper into the Nazi Party's infrastructure, they uncover shocking revelations. Hitler and his followers had already initiated the roundup of Jewish families, sending them to concentration camps. The Allies are stunned by the Nazis' reprehensible plans and promptly initiate trials for Hitler and other Nazi officials on charges of crimes against humanity. Initially, the plan was to exile the Nazi leadership to a remote island, rendering them harmless to the rest of the world, mirroring the fate of Napoleon. However, upon witnessing the genocidal nature of the Nazi Party, the Allied leaders conclude that Adolf Hitler must not be allowed to live. Given his lingering support within Germany and abroad, his escape from captivity could plunge the world into chaos, potentially reinstating him as the Führer. Consequently, the decision is made to sentence Adolf Hitler to death based on the war crimes committed during the initial invasion of Poland. He is hanged for nearly plunging the world into another catastrophic war. Hitler's closest allies face the same fate, while numerous other Nazis are incarcerated for the remainder of their lives. Capturing Hitler at the outset of World War II would have represented an ideal scenario. For this outcome to materialize, Britain, France, and the United States needed to assume proactive roles in resisting Nazi aggression early on. By severing the serpent's head at the beginning of the conflict, Nazi Germany might have been contained and eventually dismantled without plunging the world into a global war. Following Hitler's capture and execution, the Nazi Party's hold on Germany crumbles, rendering subsequent attempts to fill the power vacuum futile. The balance of power shifts, and external forces shape the restructuring of the German government. Pro-democracy candidates assume office, and Germany begins to resemble France and Britain more than its former dictatorship. This outcome would have been the optimal result if Adolf Hitler had been apprehended during World War II. The earlier his incarceration and trial for his crimes, the less harm he could have inflicted upon Europe and the rest of the world. While capturing Hitler in 1939 would have likely carried repercussions if the rest of the Nazi Party hadn't been dealt with simultaneously, it could have potentially saved millions of lives. Nevertheless, it remains uncertain what might have unfolded had the Nazis been thwarted at an early stage. The Soviet Union could have amassed a substantial army and launched a European invasion, or a different malevolent dictator might have emerged in another country. The only certainty lies in Adolf Hitler's capture, subsequent trial, and probable execution.